Hello, I'm Meg Riley in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where it's snowing, and you've joined us for another hour about the VUU. Today we'll be talking about what's going on in our congregations with family ministers, growth, learning, religious education, faith development, all of that. We have some great guests to talk to you. But first, let's have the regulars say hello and let us know where you are and how it is.
Hi, I'm Joanna Fontaine Crawford. I am in Austin, Texas, where it's kind of overcast, not too cold, but you know, it's below 70 degrees, so we can wear our Christmas sweaters.
I'm Hank Purse. I'm speaking to you from Milton, Massachusetts, and I am at the moment going through the 18-page pageant here that they have a new pageant that gets written every year. So I've been trying to make it work. That's what I'm doing. Anyway, life is good here. It's lovely. It's sunny. It's chilly. It's good.
And I'm Bob LaValle, calling in from beautiful Buffalo, New York, where it looks like we're going to have a white Christmas. But I don't have a Christmas sweater. I actually have my shiny new Standing on the Side of Love hoodie, which I'm really liking on these. You know, I'm taking the dogs out for the 30-degree walks. It's really
what is that again? What? It's a what? Standing what? Walking the dogs
Standing on the Side of Love. Maybe you've heard of it, Hank. I'm representing UU-wise.
Walking your dog on the side of love.
It's a dog park. There you go. Pooping on the side of love. So we're going to introduce special guests in just a minute. In the meantime, Hank, I know you can't be with us long. Why don't you tell us about what's up with you today?
Well, this is the normal weekly meeting, monthly meeting of the local clergy group, the interfaith clergy group here in Milton, Massachusetts, and the chief of police is going to come, which I thought was great. It was sort of a last-minute addition, and so I and the other clergy are going to go and talk to him, and I'm not too sure exactly what he's expecting, but you know, and I certainly want to ask him what he is doing to make sure that events that happened in other cities don't happen here. But I also want to not sort of take the lead in those questions unless if no one else unless no one else is going to. But I can assume that I'm guessing that everyone else is going to as well. So it'll be good. Yeah.
The chief of police. There was a reason for that.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. So that'll be good, and yeah. So I'm running around just kind of going crazy, going 6 million miles an hour. But I'm totally like, what a great crew of folks you have with you today, and it's interesting as the interim minister coming into a church, and they have two Christmas Eve services and one the 5 o'clock one where they have this pageant which gets rewritten every year. They said. When I asked, like, who helps out with it, they said, well, the 5 o'clock really belongs to the Religious Education Committee, and the 10 o'clock service is really run by the Music Committee. And I said, I don't think so. So that's kind of where we are right now. It's one of the fun things of interim ministry, kind of sorting it all out. But I will have to come back later on and see what you all said. But important folks, important old friends there too. All right. So I'm going to take off. Merry Christmas, everybody.
I don't
know what we're doing, but
next year. Ha,
yeah,
ha, ha.
All right. Merry, everybody. Enjoy. Bye.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, what's new where you are?
Well, it's always good these days to get good news, and yesterday was a really good news day. I mean, aside from Cuba on the national front, here in New York State, Governor Cuomo, the second, Governor Cuomo banned fracking in New York State, and this is no frivolous thing. The southern tier portion of New York State has significant these shale oil deposits, so it could have been a real thing. And obviously there were a lot of competing voices, but every once in a while the good guys win, and yeah, I'm just overjoyed. It's just an amazing symbol of what's happening. And folks who are watching from New York State, first thing I did was send the guy an email saying thank you very much for your decision. I mean, let people know that this was a great thing for present and future citizens in New York State. So
now, does that mean can they still like pipe gas under? Because I thought I'd read they were already doing that in New York City, and a really terrifying idea. of putting a lot of natural gas under a lot of people, huge pipelines. It just stops the actual fracking, or does
it stops the production? There is actually a pipeline proposal from Canada that runs through, separate from Keystone, that runs through New York State, and that's it goes through some environmentally sensitive areas. So that's another question, but as far as the fracking is concerned, that's not going to happen.
Hey, I celebrate every victory we got, I got to say.
Seriously.
Joanna, what about you? What's up in Austin?
There we go. So last night we had a Blue Christmas Vespers service here at Live Oak UU Church, and I believe it was the first one that they've had at the church. Some of our colleagues have been doing this. I think it's gained popularity the last few years. I had done one through CLF, so I had kind of that behind me, and I'm just so glad that we did it. And I have to do a shout out to Sean Dennison, who gave me this idea. One part of the service was at the very end. We had a whole bunch of these vials hanging from a pretty little Christmas tree, and this is water from our water communion, boiled, of course, and put in these. And so right now it's, this is a hard time of year. If you're in grief, if you're going through a divorce, if you're just not really feeling it. So, we had a service where people could acknowledge that, and then I invited anyone who wanted to have kind of a symbol of the community that is holding them to take home one of these. So really appreciate Sean telling me about doing that in his church.
How many folks came to it?
I think about, I'd say 18 to 20. So
it was like a quiet, reflective time.
Right. Small, and the people who came were, I think the people who needed it. I needed it, myself.
Even though you love Christmas, I know.
I absolutely love Christmas, but for my family, this is going to be our first Christmas without what we called our adopted grandma, who absolutely loved catalogs. She was one of those, and we're going to feel that absence this year. And I think it's really good to take a moment during the holidays and just acknowledge what is real, and not try to fake it. I have to say, anyone who's going through a hard time, there is and we can probably put the link up. There's this thing called rules, or not rules, rights of those who are grieving at Christmas time, and it's just fabulous, saying, you don't have to do all this stuff. You don't have to send all the cards. You don't have to act happy all the time. So it's pretty cool.
Well, that's great. Yeah, 2 years ago, my dad died right after Thanksgiving, and we did get a tree, but we never decorated it. We never put lights up. We never made cookies. We just, made it through, and it's true. Grief just slows everything down a lot.
Yeah, I remember that year. I was working with CLF, and I know that Lynn had a sick dog at that time, and it was, I think that was one of those years where, we just put it all out there for everyone, and there were a lot of people that responded to it.
Well, that's CLF. We're always putting it all out there. Well, here in Minnesota, aside from the snow, Joanna, can you hit mute, because I'm getting an echo at least. There's just still a lot going on around the Black Lives Matter Minneapolis movement, as there is everywhere, I know, and I find it really inspiring. I mean, one of the things I found inspiring is that a number of Jewish groups are taking every night of Hanukkah to be a time to do an action, and really out just being very visible. You've seen the things on Facebook that are like menorahs in different ways with black, fists, or just different things. I like to see solidarity. That just makes me really happy. We're having a big event at the Mall of America on Saturday here, and I'll be there with a bunch of other clergy, and the people from there have already gone to visit the organizers and really told them that they will be arrested and intimidated, grilled their families, and they're really making it clear that it's against the law to be there. And so it's not going to be like marching around. We can't have signs legally. It's going to be, I don't know what it's going to be. I'm sure they're not going to use tear gas or tanks in the Mall of America, because that would really disrupt the shoppers. So I'm really intrigued to see. But what feels good to me is these young black organizers are they're talking to the people in Ferguson. They're talking to there is a movement afoot that I have been waiting for a very long time.
And I have to say, one of the things that I am really appreciating and learning from is the fact that there's this whole side conversation that is coming out about how to truly be an ally to those who are protesting. And I really appreciate all of the leadership that I'm seeing of these activists who are making explicit the implicit. My son goes to University of Houston, and he said that there, they were instructing people. Okay, so this is, if you are not a person of color, be on the sides. Don't be in the die-in. Don't hold up a sign that says "Am I next?" And so I really appreciate the education.
We're making the streets safe for us. It's like, excuse me.
Right, right.
Yeah,
but I, so many times we will have these private little conversations, and the fact that people are being very explicit about this, I just think that's great.
Yeah, and I think all of the learning about not only race and racism but whiteness is finally emerging, especially with young folks who have really been focused on these identities. And I've just been really moved. I go to the meetings of the young people. I just sit quietly in the corner like grandma, and I just cheer for them, and I just pat them and tell them they're great, and go to their events and give money to the bail fund, and do everything I can to support this next generation of leaders, because they're the ones I've been waiting for. I'm just really, really inspired by the grace and the courage. And last night at the organizing meeting here, they showed footage of the Birmingham Children's March, and just talked about the kids just taking the lead without the approval of the adults. And so anyway, it's an interesting pass-down, leadership pass-down going on. So let's see. Well, one of our guests hasn't arrived yet, but I think we're going to go ahead and introduce the others anyway, and hope that our final guest arrives. Google has been a little capricious today. Google has given and taken video and voice, but I think we're all good now. So I'm really excited about this show. We're going to be talking about what's going on with families, what's going on with faith development, and children and adult and youth learning, and how's all that. So our guests, I think it's interesting that each of their titles is a little bit different, and so I'll start by asking them to talk about the particular way that the work is framed where they are. So we have Katy Carpman, who's the Director of Religious Education at the UU Church of Houston. We have, did I say that wrong, Katy? You're laughing. All right, what should I have said?
Emerson Unitarian
Emerson, I forgot to write, it's right there. Emerson.
Yeah, we actually have 7 or 8 churches.
I knew that. I thought, how could that be? Sorry, see, this is live TV. Emerson, UU Church in Houston. And how long have you been there, Katy?
I am in my 4th year there, and before that I was 5 years at a fellowship 4 miles up the road.
Excellent. Well, so you've got some view there. Then we have Meagan Henry, who is the Director of Education Ministries at First Unitarian Brooklyn. She's also on the Loretta board with the Liberal Religious Educators Association board, and with a portfolio for professional support. So that'll be fun to hear about. Meagan, how long have you been there?
I am just starting in my 2nd year here in Brooklyn. I moved here from Washington, D.C., and I was there for, I guess, 7 or 8 years. And before that, I was in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I'm just kind of moving up the north.
There you go. There you go. Heading for Maine, slowly but steadily.
I like it here. I think I'm going to stay.
Excellent. That has a good sound to it. And finally, we have Reverend Lynn Unger, who's at the Church of the Larger Fellowship, my colleague, the Minister for Lifespan Faith Development there. Lynn, how long have you been doing that?
I lose track, but I think it's somewhere in the vicinity of 12 years, maybe-ish.
Cool. So it'll be fun for you to talk about kind of the online and reaching out kind of different ministries that the CLF provides, though I'm sure that'll be something everyone will be talking about, is the online element now of faith development. So let's just start by asking each of these titles: Director of Religious Education, Director of Education Ministries, Minister of Lifespan Faith Development. Do those mean different things? Did that reflect a thought process in your congregation, or is that just kind of the title you ended up with?
This is Katy, and I think it's pretty much the title we ended up with. There's an idea that I'll become the lifespan something or another at some point. Right now I already do some of that work, but not enough of it to make it a full portfolio. And yeah, there's so much power in words, but at the same time, the world outside of church is changing so much that it means different things. So quite honestly, if I'm talking to somebody who's unchurched, I'm the Sunday school director, because they know what Sunday school is. That's not really a full explanation of what I do that I would use with my colleagues, but for them that works.
Interesting. That's a good addition. What do you tell people when strangers ask you what you do? That'd be fun to hear from each of you too. How about you, Meagan?
Well, because I'm new here and the title was already present when I arrived, I don't know what kind of process went into it, although I am following a minister of religious education, and I'm not an ordained minister. So but I do serve the congregation's education ministry in the lifespan, and the congregation really does treat education as a ministry. So I think that's probably where that title came from, although so I think lifespan is important in a way to acknowledge, but in this congregation they just already assume that that's what I'm doing. It's not a change from children to children and adults, or children and youth and adults. It's been this way for a while, I think, so they don't feel the need to kind of distinguish that. But also, education is something that we talk about and think about a lot because of that word and how it's, maybe it would be better to say faith development, because that is more what we're doing. It's education, but it's more than just straight up education, right? So, maybe we'll change my title at some point, but maybe not. It's not a something that we're really discussing right now.
Cool. Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, I think the variety of titles tries to get at a shift from religious education is something that happens for an hour a week during the time that adults are doing actual worship, to religious education or faith development or religious growth and learning is something that people do, and people do across their lifespan. And sort of my feeling, I'm somebody who was a parish minister before I ever did anything with religious education, and I did a DMin in religious education just kind of because it seemed interesting and not because I had any intention of leaving parish ministry. But my sense was, and still is, that faith development or religious education is what churches do. That's it's the whole thing. It's like, if you're not doing faith development, you're not doing church. But I think education means sort of the same thing, so I'm not that attached to that.
Right. Katy, what's the saying here in the southern region?
Oh, crud. Everything we do is faith development, something.
Yeah, faith development is all we do. All we teach is Unitarian Universalism, and I'm missing one.
Yeah, I know. And I think what's interesting, there's kind of a tension of that word education still to some people really represents a didactic and very static thing, and it's also just basically stuff you could get from a book or a magazine. There's a really powerful word that sometimes we're scared of, that idea of transformation. I want to be the director of transformation. Something boom, power, and it would scare the heck out of people, and heck, some days it scares me.
I don't know, we've been talking a lot about transformation is one of our upcoming themes, and it's like, yeah, transformation is heavy stuff. I'm not sure I want to be the director of transformation. That's
Is that something you can go to Hogwarts for?
What was that, Joanna?
Is that something you can go to Hogwarts for?
I think there's a lot to be said for growth and change.
Well, I remember
change is a lot more directable than transformation. I think directing transformation is pretty tricky.
Remember that movie that came out a few years ago? If you saw it, it was about the religious right and kids and really kind of raising them like an army. And it was terrifying, but I was kind of jealous, like Katy, because I was kind of jealous of the intensity of how much they cared about what they were learning. And I think one of the challenges with families now is everybody's up to here. So I'm curious what you see, about how you find space for families to have growth, learning, faith development, whatever you want to call it. How does that fit into people's lives now?
Yeah, one of the things that we've been experimenting with is our own sort of theme ministry, where we have a common thread happening in adult religious education and children's religious education in the worship services. And one of my main goals was just, can families have the same conversation on the drive home? Or if there's a potluck after service, can the 72-year-old single guy talk with the 9-year-olds at the table about something that they all heard in church today, that they've all thought about, whether it was playing with Play-Doh to do it or, reading 30 pages of text before adult RE, that we kind of have to fit into the nooks and crannies sometimes, and we want it to be really rich. That old story of the professor who fills the thing with stones and then gravel and then coffee. We like our coffee. So, how can we get good at that?
We're doing something similar. I feel like I've seen that be really effective, the idea of a theme, and where, so at one congregation I served, which Bob is going to be familiar with, because I think this is where you taught religious education, right? At All Souls in Washington, D.C., we had really...
I worked for Meagan.
Yeah.
One time, I'm so not an expert in RE. The one time I taught RE, which was preschool RE, I was under the tutelage of Meagan Henry. So it's so great to have her here. Sorry to interrupt, Meagan, but wanted to give you a shout out.
Thank you. We worked really hard to have our covenant groups, which is the small group ministry, then match, so the theme matched the monthly worship theme, and then in children's chapel, sharing that theme as well, so that it wasn't necessarily like we entirely changed the entire children's RE program, because that just felt really big, and that's kind of what we're doing in Brooklyn too, where we have the minister, Reverend Anna Levy-Lyons, does a series each year. So this year it's a parable series, and she's telling the parables of Jesus, and she is telling them from the kind of like claiming our liberal religious tradition and looking at these parables and interpreting them and bringing them into a modern day context. And then we're doing that on the same day with the kids in the children's chapel. So it's a nice way for them and we'll use some of the same songs also in the children's chapel, so that like the adults and the kids are kind of singing the same songs, and they're thinking about the same things and thinking about the same theme. Now we're only doing that one Sunday a month, but I think that it's a really good beginning, and it helps people kind of get on that path of thinking about the same kinds of things and talking about them.
I think at the CLF, there's obviously, we do things differently. We don't there is no hour that the kids are together, but I think it is about how do you foster the conversations that kind of lifespan religious growth happens when people talk to one another. And if you can foster those conversations at home, you know, if you're talking to your kid about why are people angry about Ferguson, you are doing religious education. If your kid comes with you to a march, you are doing religious education. If you sing grace before dinner, you are doing religious education. If you spend time with your kid before bedtime and answer their questions or talk about your day or help them feel secure in the world and like there is a place of love for everybody, you are doing religious education. And so I think at the CLF, really what we're looking at is how can you help people have more interesting questions? How can you help people give more interesting answers to the questions that kids are going to ask anyway? How can you help people engage in their own religious growth and learning in a way that's going to include their families? Because there is no, this is the little box. I mean, we do have curriculum like, here, you can do this at home. This, you can have Sunday school. And there's a lot to be said for the intentionality of, we're going to pay attention to something with a theme that we're going to do, like really talk about this. But I think whether it's the CLF or whether it's a bricks and mortar church, the question is always, how does that filter out? How does that inform family life in general?
Thanks.
You know, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bob. No, go.
Well, you know, as a non-RE person, or just as a total amateur, I'm really curious to hear our faith development leaders talking about the dichotomy of children in the sanctuary versus children outside of the sanctuary. That age-old, like, how do you even facilitate that conversation in your congregations, and how do you take it? Where do you want to take it?
One of the things that it's so challenging, right? One of the things that we have talked about is how worship is for that we really lift up the fact that we are a diverse community, that we have a lot of different kinds of folks in our congregation and in our sanctuary at any given time, and that the worship service is not always going to be just for me. And the worship service is not always just going to be for any one particular person. And therefore, that's what brings the beauty and the sacredness and the joy and the love into that space. That's kind of what makes it a sacred space, is that we really are creating worship that will speak to multiple diversities of people. One of those diversities happens to be age and generations. And we have a lot of generations. We're multi-generational. It's not just kids and adults. So we kind of take it out of the just kid-adult dichotomy and think about it and talk about it in terms of multi-generations, because we also have a lot of young adults. We have people who are in their 40s. We have people who are in their 70s. You know, it's so, and we have people who come from different backgrounds and who are looking for different kinds of things that speak to them. So really understanding and embracing this idea of that we are, that what makes it a sacred space is that the worship is something that many diversities of people can enjoy. That's one of the ways we talk about it.
So what is the practical application? And I asked Katy too. Like, how do you embody that in a real way?
Yeah, and I think there's another piece of this polarity. We kind of have this big chart in front of us with an axis, and part of it is the balancing needs of different people in a worship space. The other is balancing time. If families truly believe they only have 1 hour on a Sunday morning, how do they want to spend that time? Is it more, do they feel that their families are better served by spending that hour together in worship, or by people getting things at the ages and for the children to go off and be in their age classes and all that sort of things? So, you know, it is complex. And, I think it's something that, we've been dealing with for years and years, and I'm not sure I could do it in 5 minutes.
I will say, for the preschool kids, sometimes the relief the parents felt when they walked out of the room was palpable. Like, that was the 45 minutes or hour of the week, and they were going to get by themselves and with their spouse and get to be grown-ups. And there was no denying that was a real service our church was providing.
Yeah,
Right.
one of the real diversities is not just in age and style, but in need. And yeah, I have certainly talked to plenty of people who are like desperate for someone to take their child for an hour so that they can actually center down and be quiet, and people who feel like, why are you separating my family on this precious weekend time that we could all be together, and why don't we have that chance for intimacy as a family? And I think the notion of diversity is really helpful because, it is also true that there are some people who come to church because they want to be intellectually stimulated and they want something interesting to hear, which generally is not of interest to children. And there are some people who come because they want an experience of quiet and calm, which is generally not of interest to children. And there are some people who come because they want an experience of excitement and inspiration and play and fun, which generally is more appealing to children. And so all of those needs are real and legitimate and appropriate things to want from church, and not always compatible. As one of those revelations to me early in ministry, when I was hearing from the young parents they wanted more chance to have their kids in the service, and I was hearing from the older people, we cannot hear. We are using hearing aids, and when there's ambient noise, we can't hear what's going on, and the children are making things so noisy that we can't hear what's going on. It's like, you are both right. You are both so right.
Hold on. I'm going to come in for a moment. We're halfway through, and I just want to say that you're with the VUU, and this week we are talking to a passel of folks who work with families, with faith development, who do religious education. I did want to mention that our resident religious educator, Aisha Hauser, is sick and can't be with us today, and I know she's really disappointed about that. She's really excited about this show. And so there are several of us who are regulars, but that's the conversation you're in, so stay tuned. And Katy, go back to it.
Yeah, I was going to say, there was actually an interesting experiment down here in the Southwest District where if you wanted to, somebody from the district would come to your church and do a noise audit and would sit in the worship service and keep track of every single noise made by the congregation. And in every single example, the adults made more extemporaneous, shall we say, noise than the children did. But the children are always the identified patient in these situations. And it was just really interesting to actually see the statistics just laid out for us that, nobody minds that the 6 to 8-year-old is coughing, or somebody is snoring, or there are 4 conversations quietly happening.
Rustling papers.
Somebody's
or the guy who used to clip his fingernails during the worship service. That one always.
Exactly. But a little kid.
We had a guy who would wear a headset and listen to some like his cassettes during the service. This is in Boston.
and I grew up Catholic, and we were all assumed to be in service. Some years, the pastor had us leave during the homily, but then we came back in. So the assumption of what all different ages can do, I think, is different among denominations. And Unitarian Universalists sometimes can seem to think, that what a child is capable of, what adults can figure out, all these different pieces, it's different. One thing that I've loved seeing in some congregations, and including the one that Joanna was previously serving, is when you have children in worship all the time, there's sometimes our relationships with their family, where rather than the preschooler sitting with their parents who desperately need a break, they go to one of the church grandparents or somebody else they just know dearly who will sit with them and hand them the crayons as they need them. And it all goes smoothly, and it is such connection.
How do you build those connections? What have you found to be the most meaningful way to build connections between non-parents and kids?
Joanna? Yeah, so this happened, I'm very interested in this conversation because at the last church I served at the Copperfield campus of First Houston, they had 100% multi-gen worship every single Sunday, and had for like 7 years. And in fact, at one point when we were discussing not doing that anymore, it was a 17-year-old who sat on our board. And I do think that the intergenerational and the having someone, a 17-year-old sitting on the board then years later, I think those are connected. He was the one to most vociferously say, oh no, we have to keep it this way. This is very important. And it becomes part of the culture, and I think, but people definitely have to reach out. Where I'm serving right now at Live Oak, this is a conversation that we're having, and there's so many different elements at play. One of one big reason for us wanting to have to separate out the worship and religious education class times is because our RE teachers, this means that they can't come to the worship service. And so, what do you do? These are the people that are, that you are trusting your children with. How do we serve them? And then, the single parents. And what I saw at Copperfield was there were people, including the adopted grandma who we're mourning this year, who would go to the children and say, do you want to sit with me today? And they absolutely, there would be Sundays when I was a member there before I was the minister where, all of my kids were sitting with people that I was not related to, and it was good. And I think that then it's a natural progression of, okay, we know this teen, let's put him on the board. Let's make sure that he is going to and getting these opportunities out, in the district. And I think it made the church better for it. And you get, that becomes your culture, and you get used to it. But, there are a lot of complexities around it. I will say, I think that when people first start thinking about this, I think that they immediately go to two stereotypes, and one stereotype is really loud kids who just can't do it, and the other is, oh, there's going to be all these old people who aren't going to like the kids being in the service. And from my experience, that really wasn't the case. Like Katy talked about, the kids really usually were not the loud ones. And the old folks were happy to have this happen. Usually the people that had the people that I think that you have to get on board are the parents themselves. Because if they don't support this, then when little Johnny is acting up, they're not going to say, they're not going to educate him about how we act in worship. The attitude is going to be, I don't want my kid in worship anyway. Go ahead, make noise. Maybe they'll change it.
And I think another tension here is sometimes people assume that the minute you bring children into worship is going to get somehow dumbed down, that it's going to become some sort of, oh, it's just going to be one giant story for all ages. Well, first of all, I'm all about the stories, and there are ways that you can structure things and make them more that way. But a lot of the shifts that you might do will actually make for a more dynamic worship service, which is going to be useful to a lot of different people. And again, children don't react as badly as we think they do to just about anything, and they love to be invited.
And I think a lot of times. I think a lot of times if the kids are bored in the service, there's adults who are bored in the service too.
All right, I'm going to shift gears here because Meagan was sharing before we started about some really cool work that your youth group is doing, and I want to be sure to bring the youth in here. So I'd love to hear about what all of you are seeing about the youth now as we're post YRUU and all of that. Like, what's going on?
Well, this actually is connected to the multi-generational aspect also, because one of the things that has happened is that a lot of our young adults here in Brooklyn have become real interested in and excited about working with our youth, and that's sometimes middle school, sometimes high school, and we have young adults leading the high school youth group, and then we have mixed generations of adults who are leading the coming of age, which is actually 8th and 9th grade this year. And one of the things that's really cool is that they're carrying over from year to year. So with OWL last year, the junior high OWL, then those kids are in coming of age this year, and the same one of the same young adults who worked with them in OWL is also now with them in coming of age. And so they remembered some stuff they talked about in OWL and wanted to do it in coming of age, and you know, like went over to her apartment and had a party where they made gingerbread cookies, and just were like really excited about doing that and hanging out. So we had these
can you explain gingerbread cookies?
Yeah. So instead of it being like a gingerbread man cookie, which is kind of the common gingerbread man, you know, you hear about, they made gingerbread cookies. So it's and they actually made them anatomically correct, and they had a really, really fun time decorating all of the cookies, and then they brought them to the church the following Sunday and sold them as a fundraiser for an organization that does advocacy work here in New York for GLBTQ rights. So they were really, and there were a lot of adults involved, so it wasn't just the youth, and that was just really exciting to see them building that kind of relationship.
So these cookies are anatomically correct, but not cisgender? Oh, that is so awesome.
Right, yeah, I mean, it's a whole combination, many combinations of kinds of gender.
You need a lot of frosting, a lot of sprinkles.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can get behind this.
I'm just imagining, like, if you eat a chocolate Easter bunny, you know, there are people who eat the ears first, and there are people who eat the tails first, and if you get an anatomically, yeah, never mind.
Okay,
Lynn, you went there.
Yeah, see, where I went was when you're baking these things, any piece of a sculpture that is smaller than others is going to brown more quickly. So how do you keep from burning parts of your cookie?
That's where the sprinkles come in, I think.
Okay.
I think maybe if you have little aluminum foil bikinis, that would.
I was going to say strategically placed foil.
There was also icing and stuff involved, you know, but definitely, like, you know, I had a couple of them that one of them had breasts and one of them had a penis, and, you know, these were like, you know, but they also did neat things where they would, like, create with the dough, like make roll it out and make like a little spiral and put it in the genital area, and things like that were to represent that, you know, that it wasn't just male and female. They did all kinds of really interesting creative things, and it was I think it was really exciting to see these 8th and 9th grade youth hanging out with adults talking about these issues and how do we represent this, you know, like how it was just kind of a neat open dialogue and acceptance for who they are and where they are, and that was exciting to see happening amongst the generations. And another thing that I feel like really happens is through some of this working with the youth, that a lot of our adults of different ages realize that they are mentors in many different ways. They may not be an official mentor through coming of age, but that they can have relationships with the youth, and the youth realize that they can have relationships with other adults in the congregation than just their parents and their parents' friends. And, you know, maybe it's through a cookie decorating party, or maybe it's through the pie baking fundraiser, or all these different things where in many ways it takes an interest and a willingness on the part of the adults to say, you know what? Yeah, I will help with the pie fundraiser. And then to share with the other adults what the benefits of those relationships are. And then people start seeing those relationships happening and realize that they can do that too. And it kind of just spreads it out.
I want to get back to something you said that I thought seemed really cool. You said a lot of young adults are leading the youth groups for multi-years. That's fabulous. When I think back to my own high school years, it was those young adults I was fascinated with much more than people my parents' age, who might have been okay, but the young adults were modeling who I might become, and so I'm interested, is that something that the young adults naturally go to? Do those tend to be the young adults who have grown up in the church and want to give back, or how does that happen?
Well, I think we're lucky because of our geographical location. So we do get many young adults who move to Brooklyn and who are like, oh, I grew up UU. We actually have young adults coming who are like, yeah, I'm, just graduated from my high school youth group and now I'm in college, or things like that. So that part of it is geographic. And they, I mean, it's an intentional thing that my predecessor, is that what I call him? So Reverend Jude Geiger was here for, I think, 5 or 6 years, and he definitely was very intentional about reaching out to the young adult community and getting them involved with our youth. And also, though, getting them in positions on the board and on the committee on ministry and on the music and worship committee. And so it feels like, that work that he did, that groundwork, we're still benefiting from it. It's created a culture of young adults being involved and being very part of the congregation. And we have 3 young adults who grew up UU and who are the advisors for the high school youth group and have been doing it now for a couple of years. One of them, it's only this is her 2nd year, but both of the other ones have been doing it for multiple years. I don't know how we got so lucky. I think it's just, we're very open to it, very encouraging. And also the geography, but there's a climate of being very accepting and welcoming to not just young adults, but all ages. But I think that's part of what has created it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. I know some of us here are the parents of teens, and I'm curious to hear. My own teen sat by me in church when dragged, never joined the youth group, and recently I was facilitating something where I said, it was a telling queer history, so I said, let's do a continuum, the people who, this is a huge group of whoever came in the door for telling queer history, people who are, grew up religious and people who didn't, and my kid heads for the far end of people who didn't, and I'm like, I was not letting on that I was this kid's mother, I was like, really? Tell me more. Well, my mother never forced me to go to church. I was like, and then this kid who was in the middle, I said, how about someone right in the middle? She said, well, I grew up Unitarian, and that's sort of like growing up religious. It's not a proud moment in my life as a UU minister, right with that continuum. But I'm curious, Joanna, your kids and Katy, you have teenagers, correct? At least one. And Lynn, you do. How do they relate? And you have a teenage kid too, Meagan? All right, everybody but Bob. So let's just talk about it. My kid is probably at the end of one that we wouldn't want to showcase. But what about some of the others?
My kids do attend the church where I serve, and we hear a lot about preachers' kids. DRE's kids, I would say, are like preachers' kids, but they have full access to the RE supply closet. Yeah, so duct tape things happen. But we have kind of negotiated agreements of I expect them to be in church most Sundays because this is what we do as a family, and they get a certain number of Sundays off for other things they need to do. And also, if I'm staying late for a meeting, their dad will come and pick them up, so they don't have to feel like they're at church for the rest of their lives.
Do they like it, Katy? Do they like it there?
Yeah, most days. They don't like it so much when, I tell them to go, put that stuff in room 107 and pick that stuff up from room 105, but they definitely get all of their service hours taken care of. And both of them went through coming of age last year. They also went through OWL last year. So it's been interesting to watch them develop, and they're both very much, scientific, secular, humanist kind of people. But they also get that Unitarian Universalism, is a force for good in the world. And, they're glad. And we end up with really big conversations on any number of things. And for the most part, they're pretty happy about it.
Yeah. So I have one who is off at college now, and because of where we were before, and which was it was a good RE program, but it was very small, and I think at times he was the only teen there, and he was busy with debate, so he wasn't really plugged into like the whole YRUU culture and all of that, but he has a pretty strong UU identity, and I ascribe it to the fact that he was sitting in the worship services all the time, and that's something that he has said, was something very positive in his life. Now we're at a larger church with a booming RE program, and my 3 daughters all love it. And there's like a youth choir, and my teen is all up in that. She's doing the YRUU thing. So it'll be interesting to see, what happened, where they all are 10 years from now.
I'm afraid this turns into confession time. This is one of the ways that, added to the list of ways Lynn is a terrible mother. Because the reality is that we don't go to church, bricks and mortar church, on a regular basis at this point, and I'm really feeling like, youth group was incredibly important to me, and I can't now insert my teenager into church and here, go be attached to these people, and now I'm wishing that you had OWL, because Lord knows you don't want to talk to me about anything involving sexuality. It's like, oh, wait, we should have been doing this before now, because now it's kind of like I can't just say, oh, no, wait, here's something important you need to do. Go do it with people that you don't know in a community that we have not yet been connected to. So, yeah, I kind of suck.
I think there's a whole other conversation about being a religious professional and being a parent. That was something that we really struggled with, as I was going through formation, because it was, okay, should we go to a larger church because of the children? Oh, but then that would mean I couldn't do an internship later there, and it gets, with the work that we do, it gets really complicated. But Lynn, I'm really glad that you mentioned OWL. That's one thing where, in fact, my 18-year-old was talking about it yesterday, about how he is so glad that he had OWL and how more kids really need it. And, the thing that I had heard said before my kids were in it absolutely proved itself to be true. When he was in high school, all of these non-UU kids were seeking him out with their questions because they knew that he had the correct ones. We think that because of the internet that this isn't an issue anymore. As far as I can tell, the internet has just provided more wrong answers.
It's probably worth saying that OWL is Our Whole Lives, which has a variety of age-grouped curricula from very small children through adults, that was developed jointly by the UUs and the UCC, and it's
comprehensive sexuality education.
Yeah.
It is comprehensive.
Comprehensive. Meagan, how about you? How's your own family work with this?
Well, I started out as a youth advisor when I started in religious education, and my daughter was young, and I was afraid that she was never going to want to go to youth group because I was involved and she was hearing all the things about what happened on the Boston trip or whatever. But she actually was really, she did want to be involved, and she grew up like birth through 8th grade in the Knoxville church, so she had some really close friends. She went to church pretty regularly with me and made some really good friends, and she's still friends with them now. She's 22 and she's going back down to Knoxville over the holidays and going to be spending time with her UU friends who also are back home for the holidays. So they really built some great connections. She fell away and became less interested in going to youth group, actual high school youth group, when we moved, because we moved to Alexandria, Virginia when she was between 8th and 9th grade. So she kind of lost those childhood good bonded friendships. And they'd actually done this really amazing march in downtown Knoxville that was for rights for gay teens. And she'd been a part of that right before she left, and she was like really, into it. And then she came to Northern Virginia, a suburb of DC. She didn't really feel like the kids were very radicalized. The youth in her youth group, even at the Unitarian Church, were not nearly as into all of this kind of activism as her friends in Knoxville had been, which probably seems kind of surprising, but
it's countercultural, but it makes sense that in a more conservative area, the UUs do stand up and stand out more.
Totally, yeah. So she got a little bored with it in high school, and she stopped going regularly. And then when she was in college, the very small town in western Massachusetts, the Unitarian congregation met on Sunday evenings. She didn't have transportation to get there, but she did actually get transportation to a Sunday morning Quaker meeting, which was really great for her. So she did seek it out. She was looking for something even in college. And now she's just being a young adult, and I think she's she's a server on the weekends, so I think she actually works at brunch because it's really good money on Sunday. So she's not really going to church right now. But I feel pretty confident that I gave her a foundation, and if she needs it, it's there, and she knows it.
Well, thank you. And despite my own child's proclamations, I also feel that Gia has a strong foundation. For one thing, Gia knows dozens of ministers really well, and I think takes for granted, and religious professionals takes for granted the kind of love and attention that such people deliver, as if that is a generic thing to expect. So I have every trust that when Gia gets away from it, Gia will see it better. Meagan, did you want to say something else?
Yes, actually, because of all of the work that I did with youth for 12 years, I was a youth advisor and a youth programs coordinator, and it's really interesting now to see so many of those youth going into the ministry. They're going into the UU ministry. One of them, who is now later in life a friend of mine and colleague, is a religious educator here in New York. I got a message I posted something about going on the march here in New York, the Black Lives Matter Millions of Angry People March, and one of my former youth posted and said, "I remember you took me on my first march, and I'm so grateful for that." And she's in seminary now. So I think that those are some of the really positive, happy stories that I wanted to put that out there. That after many, many years and because of Facebook, which is actually kind of awesome for keeping in touch with youth and young adults as they grow and kind of seeing where they go with things. It's really kind of exciting to see that.
Amen. Yeah, I was the youth director in 89 to 92, and so those kids are now in their 40s. Parisa Parsa I knew when she was 18. So yeah, it's really it's wonderful, and it's something I love about our faith, is seeing people over a long period of time. Well, this is just a start. There's so many more things I would love to talk about. I'd love more about kind of the professional issues that you all face that are unique, and I think we're looking to do a show on shared ministries sometime in January. Love to talk even more about youth, and so thank you for kind of starting this. And I'll just say that, like Lynn, I think this is the absolute heart of what we're all doing. I still, even though I've been a religious educator since the 80s, that is still my core identity, and I think it is just what we're to do with each other. We're all learning together, and that's the kind of faith we've got. So thank you. Last words.
just a huge thank you for y'all coming on. I know that this time of year is crazy time, so best of luck, and may you not leave a trail of glitter wherever you go.
No glitter.
We should also let folks know that the VUU is taking a holiday hiatus. That's correct, Meg? So we'll see you on the 8th of January, if I'm getting the dates right.
Are Christmas and New Year's.
And I'm looking forward to a conversation about adult faith development, too.
Yeah, we didn't even get to that.
And I know it's too huge. And I want to, and Meagan, you should come on, and I want to hear about leading a UU College of Social Justice trip. Because I know Meagan took some folks to Haiti. And it'd be great to hear more about that.
Definitely. I'd be happy to. We've got some great new youth programs, too.
Yeah, we should do a whole show on pilgrimages. That's a great idea. Well, thanks. Thanks a million. Last words, anyone else? Lynn? Meagan?
Lovely to have a chance to talk with everybody.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
So long. See y'all next year.
Have a great holiday.
Bye. Bye.